Greetings everyone, welcome back to Cinema Prescriptions, where we dive deep into a film and prescribe you all that you need to enjoy the film. I'm your host, Mr. Dr. Rice, and today we will be going over Godzilla Minus One. Let's do it. So, the director of this film is Takashi Yamazaki. He directed the live-action version of Parasite. It was like 2 parts to it. He also directed Stand By Me Doraemon Part 1 and 2. And he also directed an animated Lupin the Third film called Lupin the Third the First. I don't know too much about this director. I don't typically watch too many foreign films. I do watch a lot of anime, but I do enjoy seeing foreign films. I think Japanese live-action films aren't particularly my favorite. I typically like French films and Korean films, but it's always fun to see films from different countries. So the synopsis for this film is: Japan is already devastated by the war when a new crisis emerged in the form of a giant monster. So that's a pretty short and sweet synopsis. It definitely covers everything in the film. Is pretty much about, it takes place during World War II, and that setting is really explored, and how the tension between Japan and America kind of limits its aid towards defeating Godzilla. So I feel like that's a pretty good synopsis and setting to have the film explore. So the budget for this film was $15 million, and that's kind of crazy small for a kaiju type film. So if you look back at like the last American released standalone Godzilla movie, and that was Godzilla King of Monsters in 2018, I believe, that one cost $200 million. And like that's a big difference between $200 million and $15 million. But the King of Monsters definitely looked amazing. You had all those beautiful shots of Mothra. You had Godzilla and his amazing looking atomic breath. And like just the scale of that film was awesome looking. Versus this $15 million budget. And for Godzilla Minus One to cost $15 million, I kind of felt like it cost a lot more than that. But I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, I can see why why the cost could be so low. If you look at it, you can see that a lot of the time it focused more on the terror of Godzilla, and he wasn't on screen as much as he would be on like an American type kaiju film. So it was more character driven, and so that being said, you didn't have to see Godzilla all the time. You just see him like swimming in the water like a shark or something, and that wouldn't be too hard to animate. You had like a couple of epic scale destruction scenes, but they weren't nowhere near as effects heavy as American type kaiju film would be. But like I said, this film was more character driven. It was a smaller scale film, but I mean, I feel like they used their budget really well. If I were to compare this film to other films, I would say that it's more like the old Japanese Godzilla films with the campiness and the same feel from the older films. It definitely doesn't feel like anything from like the more recent American made films. It's just like, I don't know, it feels like those movies I grew up watching with like the claymation looking Godzilla and like King Kong versus Godzilla of old. So this one definitely feels like a classic Godzilla film. What makes this film easy to love? It felt like the older films. As I said before, the campiness of the old Japanese films, and it just captured the feel of it. Like just seeing like the army, it felt like the film was like a love letter to the fans of the old series, and it just felt like what Godzilla used to be, like Godzilla versus the humans. Also, Godzilla's design was awesome. He looked like the old Godzilla. Terrifying. Like, I felt his presence every time he was on screen. He looked terrifying. And I haven't seen the evil Godzilla in a while. Also, like, it was just like a lot of really good scenes in the film. Like, when Godzilla got hurt and he had to regenerate to kind of like threw me off. I was like, oh snap, I didn't know Godzilla's regenerated like that. So also the original Godzilla theme was a very welcome addition to the film. I was like, oh, they went all the way back. So this, you can tell this is just like a love letter to the classic films. What can make the film hard to love? I mean, coming back to this film, it felt kind of slow. From me watching the newer American-made films, so I mean, I got used to seeing these huge kaiju fights. I got used to seeing all these amazing visual effects put into a film, such as the ones that were in Godzilla King of Monsters and a little bit of what was in Godzilla versus King Kong. So I mean, that could be like a turnoff to some people, going from like the action-packed films back to like the older traditional feel of Godzilla, which is humans versus Godzilla, and him not being on screen as much as he was in the American films. But like the slow feel of the film can also be a turnoff, and especially if you're watching it subbed. Like, it can make you a little sleepy if you're not careful and not paying attention to the story actively. I'm not gonna lie, I fell asleep like a couple times during the film for like a couple minutes. It definitely was hard to watch subbed for me at some points, but like when I woke up and I got into the film, I got into the story, got into the characters. Like, I'm not gonna say that that's like the worst thing about the film, because some people just don't watch subbed. What makes it easy to love is that it felt like the older films. Godzilla's design was awesome, and I was happy to hear the original theme of Godzilla. What can make it hard to love is that it can be very jarring to go from the American version of the film to like the old classic Godzilla type movies. And also the film can be slow at times, and it doesn't help that I had to watch it subbed. But other than that, I mean, I enjoyed myself in the film. But what are your thoughts? Tell me what you thought about the film. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next time.